Happy Friday. Welcome to the Boxing Gossip channel. Please hit subscribe if you haven't already done so. This is my full fight breakdown for Oleksandr Usyk versus Mairis Briedis. Probably the consensus number 1 in Usyk and number 2 in Briedis squaring off against each other in the World Boxing Super Series semi-final. And let me start by saying this is the first semi-final of what could potentially be an epic time in boxing that this tournament is bringing in. Usyk, Briedis, Gassiev, Dorticos, Groves, Eubank, even Smith-Bramer. These are very, very interesting fights. These are competitive fights. These are going to be fights with the potential to be extremely entertaining, and I applaud this tournament and what it's doing. Usyk versus Briedis. I guess you could say this is kind of all about what this tournament stands for. The tournament has created a path and an incentive for the best to fight the best. The number 1 and number 2 squaring off against each other, and doing so because of the framework and the finance that this tournament provides. It is a bit of an aside that arguably in both the super middleweight and the cruiserweight tournaments, the best fight of the tournament is arguably taking place in the semi-finals. I think many people would say this could comfortably be the final at cruiserweight, and many people would say Groves versus Eubank could comfortably be the final at super middleweight. But that is an aside. The two guys squaring off against each other. In terms of where they're at in terms of resume, let's quickly pull them up on BoxRec and talk through them. Usyk, 31-year-old cruiserweight, Olympic champion, rumoured to be making a splash in the heavyweight division if he's able to take down this tournament. 13-0 with 11 KOs, so high KO ratio. Big wins, Krzysztof Glowacki, Marco Huck, some slightly lesser wins in there as well, the likes of Michael Hunter, Tabiso Machunu, a few other more fringe names. Mairis Briedis, 23-0, and I even forget to mention, with this being a semi-final, that it's actually a unification fight in the cruiserweight division with both the WBC and WBO World Cruiserweight titles on the line. Mairis Briedis beaten Mike Perez, beaten Marco Huck, famously beat Manuel Char up at heavyweight. Other names some British boxing fans will recognise: Duradola, our very own Simon Valili. Briedis has looked very, very proficient in what he's doing so far. The fight is taking place at Riga, Latvia, which is the home of Mairis Briedis. Look, this is a big fight. This is the biggest fight of both guys' career. They've performed at not dissimilar levels. This is the money fight for them. This is the fight to prove that they are number 1. And I think the winner of this fight is likely en route to winning the World Boxing Super Series, likely en route to becoming a superstar, definitely en route to becoming a multi-millionaire, and very possibly going to become a hugely hot commodity in the heavyweight division. Briedis isn't as big as Usyk, but his willingness to fight Manuel Char, and he stopped Manuel Char, who's now a heavyweight champion of some variety, let's not forget that, means that both of these guys will probably be considering their options as heavyweights, and who knows, Briedis is 33, Usyk's 31. Maybe they won't want to mess around. Maybe we could see these guys squaring off against the likes of a Joshua or a Deontay Wilder at some point in the future. I wouldn't rule that out at all. How do I see the fight? For me, Mairis Briedis, a guy who I view as extremely proficient, very, very, very solid, and a bit of an all-rounder. He's not lacking in any area whatsoever. 18 KOs out of 23 fights, including that knockout of Manuel Char up at heavyweight, shows that he's heavy-handed. For me, he's defensively aware. He's got good judgment of distance. He's got decent timing. He is what I would describe as a very proficient guy, a solid technician, and I don't look at his game and see glaring holes and glaring weaknesses. I would say he's a no-frills attached fighter. I don't look at this guy, I don't look at Briedis and think he's a great stylist. But look, it's not always the most stylish boxer who wins the fight, and sometimes the guy who ticks every box is every bit as commendable as the guy with all the tricks. As for Oleksandr Usyk, I think to look at him and to watch his in-ring performances, he is potentially a more entertaining fighter than Briedis, and he potentially does come with certain thrills attached. His movement around the ring is electric. He's got all the tricks, he's got all the skills. He looks like a very, very talented, eye-catching, athletic fighter. You know, a lot of people talk about him being a cruiserweight Lomachenko. Obviously, they've got a certain training setup, etc. So that's probably why that comparison is made more often than not. But, you know, to be fair to Usyk, there are some similarities there in the way that they approach the game. I think it's an interesting fight. My tendency is to lean towards Oleksandr Usyk. Fundamentally, I see Usyk as having the superior upside to Briedis. I see Usyk as being the potential to be an elite fighter. He's arguably already at that level with some of the wins he has. You know, Briedis isn't too far off that level either. I guess they are fairly comparable in terms of the quality of wins they have. But with Usyk, he's much younger in his professional career. He's only 13 fights in, and the way he's taken care of opposition, you know, looks like he could be a very, very special fighter indeed, and someone who could take a hell of a lot of beating at cruiserweight. I suspect in this fight that Usyk will have a size advantage, and I suspect that Usyk will have a movement advantage. For me, I look at Briedis as a guy who has decent footwork and likes to adjust inside and outside of range so that he's timing his punches well. And I don't just mean timing in terms of speed, I mean timing in terms of distance. I think he might have more problem doing that against a guy like Usyk compared to the success he had against someone like a Marco Huck or, you know, Simon Valili, for example. I think Usyk will be a constantly moving, bobbing, weaving, awkward, slick opponent to hit. And I also think Usyk may be able to catch Briedis with eye-catching punches from range. You know, Usyk throws flurries. He's very conscious of how eye-catching his punches are. He's got quick hands. He puts combinations together well. He's got a decent punch variety. I think he may have some success pumping shots down the middle against a smaller man in Mairis Briedis, and I think he can possibly outmaneuver him. You know, I think Briedis, he's got good footwork in terms of the adjustments he makes, but I think Usyk may have faster feet, a potentially better lateral movement. All in all, I do see this as a fight where at certain points Briedis may have to come forward and try and pressure and try and close down the gap, and I think Usyk, with his back foot game, with his skills, with his style, could make for a very, very difficult target to find. And I think all the time he'll be throwing very eye-catching punches down the middle. Neither of these guys have shown any durability problems as far as I'm aware in their career to date. You know, they're both big punchers. Usyk's got a higher KO ratio, but I do wonder if that's because he was somewhat flattered by the succession of early knockouts he scored when he was starting off his career against a lower level of opponent. You know, perhaps the fact that Briedis' KO ratio is slightly lower is indicative of the fact that he's been fighting for longer and he's maybe been mixing it at a higher level since, you know, 2015 sort of time, which is when Usyk was, you know, still in the early stages of his career, I guess you could say. I think it's a good fight. I'm inclined to go Usyk to win the fight on points. I am. Whether either of them have the instant one-punch power to take the other one out, I'm not sure. I think they're both defensively gifted. I think they're both technically sound. I don't think there's too many glaring gaps. And I think both of them will be tentative going into the biggest fight of their career and aware of what the other one brings and the other one's potential punching power. I suspect it will be a tentative opening which Usyk creates a little bit of an early lead with his boxing and moving, and I suspect that as Briedis tries to close and tries to chase, Usyk may be able to ram home his advantage by keeping him long, boxing him from the outside, by jab and move, and maybe opening up a bit in the middle to late rounds and showing some of his, you know, sublime skills. I think Usyk is a fighter with more depth and more upside than Briedis. Although I do acknowledge in making this prediction I am getting a little bit suckered in by the bells and whistles that you attach to Usyk's game, and you know, whilst Mairis Briedis has, you know, as I say, he's looked like a no frills attached fighter to me, and certainly in the Mike Perez fight it was a kind of clumsy fight. You kind of haven't seen that type of performance from Usyk, but you know, Perez is a decent fighter. Maybe we could see more of that when these two guys at such a high level square off. I'm Usyk for the win. For what it's worth, I actually make this the least competitive of all of the World Boxing Super Series semi-finals. I think all 4 of them are competitive fights. I would say this is the least competitive. I'd say out of the 4, my most confident prediction is Usyk to beat Briedis. I just think Usyk is destined for a very, very high level. I do have my doubts about him transitioning to heavyweight because of size and style. But I do think he could well be the king of the cruiserweights. Gassiev-Dorticos is a fantastic fight. We'll cover that in due course. And it may be, funnily, it may be that the winner of that fight actually stylistically causes a little bit more problems for him. We'll have to see how it plays out. Anyway, guys, that's my take. Please leave your comments in the section below. Who do you think is going to win this fight? By what method of victory? How competitive do you see it? Please leave the comments in the section below. Normal request, guys, if you've enjoyed this, please hit the thumbs up button. Please hit subscribe if you haven't already done so. Enjoy the fights and have a good weekend. Thank you.